Hi, I'm Nayan. I'm the Executive Director of AI here at ustwo. I'm relatively new to ustwo, so I'm 2 months in, but formerly a healthcare founder from New York, engineering background. We have an amazing group of industry experts here, and they have firsthand experience enabling teams to build with AI in a responsible way. I'll let each of them introduce themselves in a moment, but quickly just to kick things off, we're here today for talking about responsible AI. I think, as we all know, AI has rapidly shaped the world, and companies are actively building and bringing generative AI features and products to market. The question of ethical use of technology has never been more critical. Regulation and safety initiatives are starting to come into play. And so far, the EU Act, the US Congressional AI Task Force, China's AI policies, and around large language models, these approaches are broad, open to interpretation, and I think these initiatives, will struggle to keep up with the pace of new development. So companies are taking these matters of responsibility into their own hands. We just saw this week with Apple's launch of their personal intelligence system, showing the world how to ensure privacy by initiating requests first on device. And so their partnership with OpenAI marked the first of many external models that I think they'll plan to support. But if you get a chance to look at their machine learning blog, you'll find that they have a foundational building block right at the bottom that says responsible AI. And so I'd like to think that we beat them to the punch, having planned this event months in advance of WWDC. And so this conversation will tackle what can be done. And so to ensure as businesses and builders that we're acting responsibly without getting in the way of innovation. So tonight we'll cover how responsible user-centered practices can safeguard against unintended consequences while having the potential for creating impactful breakthrough products and experiences. So with that, I'll let our panel introduce themselves, and we'll kick things off. So Rachel, take it away.
Hi, I'm Rachel Caldica. I'm founder of a studio called Careful Trouble. And I've been working on the internet for a long time. So I started in the 90s when you could learn how to do everything instantly. And I spent 20 years in product and 10 years in ethics and policy. The work I do now ranges between, on the one hand, making things that show how it could work, and then advising others to kind of help them do it in a way that maybe, I hope, less bad than it could be otherwise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Romain Dardour. I'm the head of product at L'Oréal Beauty Tech for services. I'm very new in the world of large enterprises. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. So I had a marketing agency and then a customer data platform that I founded in the US. So I did a lot of tech, a lot of data, worked with a lot of unintended behaviors, and basically did Vietnam when it comes to product building with small teams and everything that could go wrong going wrong. And now I'm at L'Oréal trying to bring the way we build tech products in smaller, more agile, more tech-focused companies in a big group. That's actually pretty fun, and we have quite a few generative AI initiatives that we're probably going to talk about.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Janine McKelvey, and I am the Group General Counsel for Data for BT Group and for OpenReach. I oversee a team of lawyers, but also compliance and assurance specialists who come from technology, risk, governance backgrounds. I also am one of two people who oversee the data governance function across BT. And my function deals with everything from legal advisory to all parts of our business. So B2B, B2C, innovation, networks, etc., to all of that kind of second line assurance and compliance. For those of you who don't know, BT is not just a telco. We actually run the biggest science and innovation park in the UK called Industrial Park. We've been doing AI for 30 years. We have more AI patents at the UK Patent Office than any other company in the UK. We're in augmented reality, virtual reality. We do drones. We're in the healthcare space, retail space. We do a tremendous amount in the fraud space, but also in security. We're big in security, not just protecting the UK, but protecting other nation states from cyber attacks. So, yeah. We do a lot in the background.
You win.
Okay.
Let's unpack responsible AI a little bit. Every client that I've talked to so far has a different take on it internally. They have different values around AI. What does AI mean to each of you?
Responsible AI. So, one of the things that I talk about a lot is just enough. Like, can we not automate too much? Can we do exactly the thing that is needed? And there are three important things that we think about there. One is how to maximize benefit to everyone, minimize harm, and the last is to think about the impacts that the technology you're making has on the world around us. So whether that is climate, other people, and to be mindful, because I think it's very easy to think that like the tech is like magic, happens over there, but I think very important to be aware of hardware at the moment. So very into trying to think about how to make the most of things rather than the worst.
The way I see it, when you do product, I've been doing a lot of evangelization of what is product, the role of product management in a company. And you have the design teams which care only about the consumer. You have the tech team that cares mostly about the tech, and the business team that cares about building a business that is valuable. And one of the first things that I say is the tech team, if you push them, they're going to build something fast, but it's not going to last. It's going to be tech debt, it's going to break down the road and so on. And the way I see responsible AI is the equivalent on the business side. Over the past 10 years or 15 years, companies have for real gained a conscience that if they do something that is not sustainable, if they betray the trust of their consumers, they're going to lose. And large companies have a lot to lose and little to win to take risks. And this is the opposite for startups, which means, this is why they, take so much risk. But so as a large company, if you don't for real, treat your responsibility with AI with the utmost importance, you're going to destroy everything that your company stands for, and you're going to destroy the trust. And so this is why it's so core to the business that it's having the same conversation, it's having the same position on every single topic. If we're talking about, conversational AI as everyone else, that it can answer, HR like the HR manager would. So it's incredibly hard to do. We're going to talk about it, but basically AI is a perfect tap dancer. It can tap dance its way into anything, but when it comes to actually being serious, that's a different story.
For me, when I think about responsible AI, I think about innovation first. Innovation is critical. There are a lot of downsides to innovation if you don't manage it, but innovation is essential for us as a species to evolve and survive, and for this planet to survive. But it has to coexist alongside a bunch of core values and principles that make us human and that are material to our humanity. So getting that coexistence between the two is really important. What we want is technology to serve humanity and not the other way around.
Great. So I think now that we have a feel for what responsible AI means, before we dive deeper, I'm thinking back to when the studios here started working with DeepMind, and that was around 2015. Shortly thereafter, there was the paper "Attention is All You Need," which was essentially the foundation of transformer models as we know it today, which led to the development of LLMs, which caused all the hype that we're in the midst of now. And so if you were to think back when you or your company has started getting into AI in the first place and started taking it seriously, what were some of the concerns? What were some of the challenges?
So I know when I first came to BT, I was blown away by what they did. I thought I'd done my research and I thought I knew what they did, but I'm still learning, and I've been there for 4.5 years, and every day I'm still learning. But at the same time, I recognized, given my function and my responsibility within that organization, that we needed policies, standards, controls, all that boring stuff that innovators think slow them down. The truth is, if you do governance properly, you shouldn't. In fact, if you're doing it badly, then you're slowing people down. If you're doing it well, you're not slowing them down. And I'll give you an example in terms of our data scientists and our AI scientists. First time I met with them, they said to me, it takes us 70% of the budget that we have to do a project and 70% of the time to find the data, clean the data up, before we can even get to doing the experiments. And then after that, we're not sure what we're supposed to do with the output that we got. So for me, making sure we had a proper data governance function with the proper people, processes, and tools was critical, because that really changed the game a lot. Making sure we educated people about following the processes. You have data architects, data engineers, data scientists there for a reason. So use them, understand what their roles are. So kind of rolling that out across the company, that whole data governance piece was critical, but also making sure that we had policies, standards, and controls that people played a part in writing, because the lawyers can't just sit there and write them. There's some of this stuff that's brand new to the lawyers. So you want to do it with the business and find a way that works for the business. So putting all of those pieces in place has probably it's been critical. And the fact that we started doing that as soon as I came in, there was some stuff already there, but I could see what was coming over the horizon, not just in terms of AI legislation, but lots of data legislation that was all going to hit companies at the same time. So we needed to build something that was fit for the future. And I think there was so much data, so much fantastic AI activity, but we needed to wrap it up in processes that kept us safe, but also gave the business what they needed to move quickly. And that's important. You want innovation that happens safely, and that's part of what my team was about building.
And that's an interesting point. I mean, when you're thinking about building ahead of the capabilities of the model, you do that, right? How do you build for something that doesn't exist today? And so, there you go. Rachel, what are your no's? Yeah, you can't. You have to be careful. You can't talk about the AI, or we'll activate it. So Rachel, how do you think about building ahead of where the capabilities are? Because there are challenges with the models that we have out today.
Yeah, and so I suppose to pick up partly your previous question too. So I suppose because I've been working in R&D for years and years and years, it's like you're always working in a context where you don't quite know how a thing is likely to land. And, it feels like these two letters, A and I, kind of really landed in about 2015, really dominated lots of the things. But really, we'd been automating loads of things for like years and years and years. And then it's only kind of wrapping it up in like a different way of thinking about it. And in my previous job, I worked with a team where we created a way of working that helps product teams kind of game out to sort of understand if they have made X or Y to do a particular job, and they're only thinking about the business case, then we created a format that helps people understand how it works in the world. And so it's actually really, really easy, particularly when you've been working to the brief, right, to then think about like a few key questions about how the world at large works, right? And one of my the favorite ones is like, what if this becomes really popular really fast, right? And people look like really unwell. Because like, particularly if you're making a thing that's a bit risky and you're thinking you can control how it takes off, and then the idea that the people you weren't expecting are likely to be using it. And I think if we know one thing from the last like 20 years is that if you make a digital thing that really works, what will happen is the people you never thought would use it for a thing you had never thought they would use it to do, right? And of course, we can't game that out. But methodology, it's called consequence scanning. You can Google it. And one of the things it has is like a way of developing a risk approach in order that you're thinking about what you're really concerned about now, what you're sort of keeping an eye on, and what you think is unlikely to happen, but you're going to like keep an eye out like on that just in case, because they're the things that not only if they happen mean it like really, really works, but that you're less likely to control it.
And, you talked about ways of working and, building new teams, thinking about ideas that aren't possible yet. So Roman, you've spent a lot of time building this on top of this technology. Can you talk about the early days and what that looked like?
So, I mean, when I said I did Vietnam earlier, it was a way of saying I learned my lesson. And for years, I built a solution in search of a problem. I had a platform, and that platform could, in my mind and in the minds of my co-founders, do everything with customer data. And we were trying to look for ways to explain to people how wide, how incredible that was. And we kind of struggled. And so when I joined L'Oréal, there was like an initial discussion around, hey, Gen AI is coming. We've been doing AI for years. We bought a company in 2018 called Modiface, which has been doing face diagnostic on the basis of a selfie and is able to kind of predict the facial features, like dark circles and analyze the face. So it's not our first foray into AI, but Gen AI came. And very early on, there was people talking about what we want to build. And it took a lot of effort to say, okay, let's take a step back. Let's please not talk about the solution. Let's first make sure we have a problem in front of us, because building a chatbot is what everyone and their sister is going to do. And we definitely don't want to invest millions and years into building the perfect chatbot that no one wants. That's the story. Like, graveyards are full of solutions in search of problems. And so we wanted to make sure we were only looking at the problem, and maybe the solution is AI, maybe it's something else. And, we were lucky enough to actually find something that really resonated with the ustwo team. We did like a lot of work, talked to a lot of people to find like, why should that thing exist? And when we framed it that way, really talking about the problem, it actually became easier to see what the solution should be. It kind of became obvious. It's like, we don't know if we can do it,
Finding the user
but if
need,
we can do it, then, it's like we have a boulevard ahead of us. So that's how we kind of figured out how to invent something that wasn't there.
And so, we've started to unpack what responsible AI means and how you might start building teams around it. But let's get a little tactical. And so, Janine, as given your role, how do you start building teams, but putting the right policies and governance in place?
So I think you have to start off with what is the company strategy for AI? And that seems like such a basic question to ask, but I've worked in a lot of places where you ask, what is your strategy for data? Because they've got all this data and they're going to make money from it. Okay, what's the strategy? How are you going to make money from it? And that's the hardest thing for them to articulate. And that takes ages for people to actually come up with a plan. And I think the same thing happened with AI. But once you have that strategy, you need to start thinking, okay, so where is AI going to intersect with this business? Are we buying it? Are we developing it? Are we using it? Are we selling it? Is it a combination of these things? And then who are the key stakeholders? So you got that strategy, then you work out how it intersects, then you think, okay, so is it procurement that's important? Is it the data scientists that are important? Is it what parts of the consumer business are important? What parts of the B2B business are important? Who are the critical stakeholders that need to be involved in building the right controls and standards, working out which tools are needed, which processes will work for the business? So for me, that's how we've tackled it. Now, from a purely kind of governance perspective, you need a whole bunch of things, like you need an inventory of your AI. You need to know where it's being used, who's using it, what are they using it for? And that includes not just the AI going forward, it's your historic AI as well. It's that legacy stuff. And because you've been using AI without realizing it for years. Just think about when you have used tools to translate things for you. Okay, that was AI. So, in most cases it was. So having that inventory is really important in terms of managing your AI, and also having something that it's an impact assessment for the AI. You need to start thinking through what are the key questions that we need to be asking around the AI. Now, one of them is, do we need AI to do what you're planning to do? Because everybody wants to bottle it up and say it's driven by AI, but maybe it doesn't need to be. And that, by the way, I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing a shift from most companies thinking, oh, well, maybe we don't need to use these big, large language models. We can use lots of little ones to get done what we need, which is probably better for the environment, etc. But you need to be thinking about asking the right questions to get a true sense of where are the risks for the business, and who needs to be involved to manage those risks. Because it might be people in your legal department, it might be the data architects or the engineers that play the most critical role in managing some of these different risks. And then, of course, you need a process whereby, because you're not going to just be letting these things go wild, you're going to have to, not just in the creation of it, kind of learn, go back, change, learn, go back, change. Even if you're putting products out into commercializing them, you need to be thinking about what are the learnings? How do we change this? Those are just some of the thoughts.
Sure, yeah. And so, we've been receiving a large number of briefs, everything from new products to helping impact what might happen at the company's roadmap level. And so these are, big questions around strategy. So what are some practical tips? I'll turn this over to Rachel, but what are some practical tips around setting a strategy for a company?
So I think there's kind of two, I think to your point, one of the things is sometimes you want to use AI to play, right? You want to find things out, you want to have a go. And I think knowing when you're having a go and knowing when you are changing the business are really important. And to make the space where it's okay to play and to try things out and to become comfortable. But one of the things we talk about a lot is that you need to make a choice, and a choice that is in line with your values. And so I do lots of work all over the world in ethics, right? And one of the things that's very clear to me is that it might feel as if occasionally people talk about, do we need a Hippocratic oath for developers, right? And the thing is, particularly in a business context, but actually in it's not as if really there are violable rules, right? So we have the rules about rights, we have the G's that set where we ought to be heading, and between that there's a huge space, and your business might be happy to trade off certain things and not others. And one of the things that we you'll find is it's very important to get people to articulate those red lines really early on, and to know in advance when they are not going to be comfortable, which is really, really hard to do that early on. But what you want to do is anticipate where you're likely to become uncomfortable. I think the other really important thing is automate the easy things, right? Automate the things that everybody knows how they work. In order that if they aren't working, you've got hundreds of eyes on it, right? Whereas if you automate a thing that nobody understands, that's a black box, or that is like your hardest possible a thing that people come back to again and again and again, you are likely to make it worse, right? And not only will you make it worse, but you're just making more things to solve later on. And just to give an example of that, you see like in public the service, right? In a social care, the things that need automating there are how to get the people to the appointments fastest, how to book the appointments, how to understand traffic flows, how to escalate fast. It isn't how to work out who is at risk, right? And so I really think if we can be automating at the moment to maximize the time that the people in the system have to do the job, and meanwhile we're like allowing the tech to do the things we know it does well, then we're giving ourselves loads of room to try things out.
Yeah, and so, there's a lot of room to play and to experiment and to build, but at what point do you know that it's ready, right? So how do you build that discipline and the strategies around testing to know that, this is now ready to put in front of people? So, Roman, I know, again, you've built a lot, and so what's your testing strategy?
I'm gonna talk about this. I just wanted to answer, to elaborate on a few things that we've seen. We've been very lucky at L'Oréal talking about like having a strategy that very early on, a year ago, we had a clear frame on where we wanted AI to be useful and where we didn't want to go. One of the first things that we published is like, we're selling products that help people be, better in their skin, that help about beauty. So in no circumstances we will ever use AI to generate faces or any human parts in our advertising, because that would be basically very cynical. I mean, that would be very cynical to fake that. So that's a rule, global rule and then, there's where automation can help. That's an interesting one. Very early on, I was talking with a Center of Excellence of AI, which is one of the groups that centralizes the use cases of AI across the group. And, we're, having coffee, discussing, and he was like telling me, yeah, you know what, everyone's coming to me, giving me loads of unsorted data, PDFs and such, and saying, can you please make them useful with AI? And that's like how you should not approach the problem. It's like everyone was seeing AI as like, oh, finally an unlimited number of interns to do the dirty work for me, which doesn't really work that way. The data has to be clean if you want to make it usable. But you were asking about what we put in place with testing. In the life cycle of the one of the products that we're building, which is a Gen AI assistant. I'm describing it very badly. My real pitch is better. But basically, we started like June last year. We worked for 3 months just to understand what would be useful. We talked with a lot of consumers. We did 20 prototypes that we threw away. Then, we saw that there was some potential. We worked for 1 more quarter to really nail down, does this, work? I mean, is there like a real big thing behind there? Do we have a realistic shot at building something valuable? And then in December, it all came down to the CEO saying, okay, there's a story here. I'm going to talk about it on the CES, the keynote of the CES at Las Vegas. Then everyone gets excited about the product internally. And now comes, okay, we have to release that thing for real. And the first thing we did is start to industrialize this and talk, on a bi-weekly as in twice a week, with the legal team, the head of with the head of the group's legal team and the head of data privacy, to say, okay, now how can we actually make this behave properly? Because it's a nightmare. It can say anything. It can explain how to build a bomb with hairspray. It can talk about the competitors and say the worst thing. It can tell you to put mustards in your eyes because that's going to help. I mean, how do we put a rein on this and make it safe for people, compliant with the group's position on microplastics, on carbon footprint, and so on? How do we actually, the first meeting was interesting. It's the legal team told me, please tell me everything the bot, as they were calling it, will say, and we'll tell you how to answer. And I'm like, might be slightly more difficult than this. And so we worked for one full quarter to put in place, to invent some best practices, put in place some ways to get it first to give the right answer, but also then to test that we're still over time giving that answer, that we're not, having regressions. The same as automated testing, but for conversation, that's called evals. And even then, as of today, we have single turn evals, like question, answer. We know how to check that and verify that everything is correct. But multi-turn, so basically looking at an entire conversation and making sure that it's going the right direction and not giving the wrong answers, this is kind of the hard problem, and you have no choice but to solve it. So even as of today, there's still some uncertainty on. Yeah.
Can I jump in with two thoughts? Just off of what both of you have said. I think if you're looking at doing testing, you must try and do it in a safe environment. So I bet you a number of you are trialing Copilot. And for me, Copilot with our workforce is better than them going wild on ChatGPT. For companies who say they're doing innovation, sorry, am I saying something? Yeah, that's going to upset you. But for companies doing innovation, you land up saying, hey, we'll let our employees, we had to let our employees use Gen AI. But the big concern was, beforehand, when you were dealing with AI, you could control where it was coming in and who you were giving the AI to. When Gen AI came along, you couldn't rely on the front door and the back door being locked or controlled. Everybody was opening every window and everything was going everywhere. So you needed to put some guardrails around the use of ChatGPT, for us anyway. But then we looked to have a safer environment for the sort of bog standard workplace stuff. And Copilot was excellent for that, because we were able to make sure that data stayed in a particular space and that company information could be put in there and it would be deleted after a session. Now we haven't stopped the use of ChatGPT. We've limited the use of it, and we've controlled who can have access to that. And it's not just ChatGPT, it's many other sites. So making sure you understand which sites are being used by your staff, who is using that, and having controls around how they use it, when they use it. So we use it more by exception now than just by, hey, everybody can do whatever they want on any Gen AI site they want. We have to bring some controls and rules into place. The other thing I was going to say just quickly around the responsible piece and how do you kind of work out where your North Star is. Obviously, there's a lot out there around data ethics, and I think a lot of companies build policies. They have responsible tech teams, they have advisory boards, and they look at things like what is core to us, what is key to us in terms of making sure we do things responsibly. So we're accountable, we're transparent, we do things for good, things like that. It's those sorts of standards, and then you test yourself against those standards. One other critical area I think you need to be looking at is what are the core values and statements you make as a company. If you say you are the most trusted in something, then you better be making sure that you are testing and you are, your AI, and you are controlling the spaces in which you operate. So think about what the corporate values are as well when you build that framework that needs to wrap around all the other controls you have for AI.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, when I was talking about the legal team asking what it's going to happen, what is it going to say? The really difficult thing is that when we started, all of us, we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know where even to look at, to look for risk and that was something really, really unnerving, because basically you're operating, with confidence, but you don't know at any time if you're going to make a discovery that challenges your entire vision of things. And so we all learned and gained incredible experience by trying to do it and saying, okay, now we saw this, let's adjust. Let's not deal or compromise with it. We have to fix it for real. And we're basically learning at getting good through the doing of the project by setting a very high bar. It's a big journey.
So switching gears a little bit, having spent time in government, I've seen firsthand regulatory frameworks being really hard for, companies of all sizes to adopt. And so given that we're entering this new space of generative AI and technology, Rachel, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but, what role does government play in regulating AI?
Wow. So
Softball.
I think one of the things is, right, it's really important for government to do what only government is able to do. And that's the first thing. And I think I am going to say, like, in the UK, I think we're currently going down a little bit the wrong path, because what we're trying to do is technically audit, but only technically audit the things that people are happy to give to government, which means quite a lot of things are not being looked at, right? Which means that the government can't really understand what's actually happening. One of the things I'm really interested in is, how do we understand how technologies play out in the world, right? So there's a difference between what your duty is when you're making a thing, shipping it, testing it, what are the standards you're testing it to, but actually, what are the impacts of it over time? How do you understand that in disaggregated ways? Because, to my earlier point, we don't know everything that is likely to happen, or everything that could be a consequence. And really, I think what we really need is for government to be doubling down on the social contract, to be talking about the society we want to live in and how to uphold that and to set minimums. But equally, and this is the hard part, to be holding to account. Because one of the difficult jobs of government, and I could talk about this for like hours, so I'm like making this very short, is on the one hand, you want productivity, you want profit, you want to inspire companies to do amazing things, and you want everyone to be safe, right? And you want everyone to be well and healthy, right? And those two things, I think, to your point earlier, I think every creative knows constraints are amazing, right? When you can do whatever you like, you very often do like the worst work, right? But when you know the brief, when you know the floor and the ceiling, right, I think it's really helpful. And just to say, I was a non-exec at a regulator for 4 years. And how regulators work is not how tech companies work, right? Regulators work how regulators work, and they understand things how regulators do. And it's going to take us a long time for those two models to come together, which means there's a real opportunity to lead by example and to do good work. And there's another opportunity to do bad work, right, and to take advantage. But I hope collectively we would all have responsibility not to do that. And unfortunately, when the law is not quite keeping up, that's a grey area that I think we have to tread very lightly on.
I'll add to that.
Yeah, I bet.
Before I do that, I do just need to say, and I have no shares in them, that ChatGPT does have an enterprise version, okay? It does. So there you go. There's a safe space there if you want it. But regulators tend to, the question they ask themselves all the time is, it's about the consumer and the end user and the harm you can do. So they are always looking at that. And you do need to be able to show that you have thought about that and you have built controls and you have, there's a way for them to come back and get redress or to have their voice heard, and they don't want consumers being in any way deprived of rights or treated badly. So I would start with that when you think about the regulators. But I agree. I think the regulators are playing catch up a lot on this. If you think about how hard it is for you to hire a data engineer, data scientist, how expensive these people are now, think about the poor regulators trying to find these people to actually help them build the laws and the rules, etc. Europe has taken a very, they've set their red lines, and they've, just like GDPR, they did reshape a lot of the way the world addresses the use of personal data with GDPR. And like it or loathe it, it became a benchmark. And they've looked to do a similar thing now with AI. Different regions are, though, tackling this slightly differently. And the UK has gone in with a more principle-based approach. That actually works for me because I look to Europe and I think, there's my scarecrow of like, this stuff is banned. This stuff is high risk. This is medium. This is low. And I know that if we're going to sell products into that territory, my products have to meet those standards. And that helps me draw a line for the countries that don't set clear standards, because it's hard to build things completely differently for every different region, because your product designers are going like, I don't understand, I can't make 12 versions of this. So you try and set a bar somewhere. And so the European approach, actually, I'm okay with it. But the UK is lovely because it says, be principles driven, guys, go innovate. So that's also good because I can look in the 180 countries that we're operating in, and we start looking for the principles that are coming out of all the different pieces of legislation, and we design our framework and our governance to try and meet those principles, because a lot of the principles are quite similar. And one last thing, don't just think of AI legislation is all I have to think about when we look at AI. There's obviously data legislation, there's security legislation, there's a lot of other things coming at you in this space. And that's why, again, I would say a principles-driven approach is quite useful, because otherwise you just look at all this legislation and think, I can't even read the first piece of legislation, let alone get through all the rest of it and try and manage all of this. So I would say that is a useful way to try and approach it, is get your principles right and build your governance and your framework to address those key principles with the right people, tools, and processes.
Cool. So before we move to questions, what are some quick lessons that you would leave the audience with? What's important to know, given that you've been building with AI, you've built these teams, there's product in market, we're innovating. What would you like us to all take away?
Oh, this is less of a takeaway than a kind of way of thinking about AI. I spoke on a panel for Reuters a little while ago, and they showed a survey that they had done. And one of the questions they asked as part of the survey they'd done over a number of months was, how do you see AI? Is it, like you've got a free supply of your favorite food for a year? They came up with all these different crazy things. And one of them was, and by the way, most people said it's like winning a free supply of your favorite snack. But so I remembered that one, but which I thought was weird. But the one that resonated with me was, is it like winning a date with your celebrity crush? And I put my hand up for that one. And I said, it's that, but the problem is you get to the date and you realize that he's still a teenager. And that's a problem. So probably an underage teenager, actually.
No.
And when you think about it, because, they are subject to drift, their mind drifts. You've got to worry about the data you're putting into them. They are subject to bias. You've got to have a adult human in the loop. You've got all of these things that actually, honestly, this analogy can go on. Totally, this analogy can go on and on and on.
That's a powerful mental model.
It's
like Chris Hemsworth, but he's 12.
Oh, damn. Let's wait 10 years. But it's actually funny because we had like a lot of iterations in our Gen AI product, and like the first one was very optimistic. We're gonna set a prompt, we're gonna tell it how it should behave, and like, please ask clarifying question when relevant. And we kind of put it there, and the word we used was, it kind of looked like a 13-year-old intern trying to do sales. It's like very clumsy, very weird, like all the wrong conversations at the wrong time, and it's too much enthusiasm at the wrong time. And so that is, it's, we were very optimistic, and then we said, okay, we've got a lot of work to get to something that feels natural. And
I'm going to be very old by the time he's grown up. Yes.
So I'm
we're
going to say, which I think is appropriate in this, if something makes you feel weird, don't do it. And I think that's
very good.
All right. I think on that note, we should turn it over to the audience for questions.
I don't know if it's going to follow that. My name's Sue. Thank you so much. Such an interesting discussion. I've learned a lot. Rachel, you made a really interesting point about regulators and tech companies, and I assume big businesses as well, work in very different ways. Do they, in your opinion, and I'd be interested in all your different perspectives on this, is do you think they want to work together? And if not, how might you create that demand to work together? It'd be interesting to hear from the sort of BT and L'Oreal perspective, but also from your perspective as well.
Can I just come in from the regulator side? One of the things I've seen of working with regulators is when a regulator builds a regulatory model, the regulatory model doesn't map how a thing is made, right? And so one of the things I've been trying to encourage for quite a long time is can we take a more anticipatory approach, right? So how lots of regulating works here is after the fact rather than ahead of time. And one of the problems is, so we've seen with the online safety bill, it will take Ofcom probably another 3 years to stand up what that looks like because they need to do it after the fact. And I think to get to a point where everyone can collaborate more, it needs to be more anticipatory. You need more trust and trying out together, rather than auditing after the fact, rather than reporting after the fact, because then it's too late, right? And so there's an extent to which the things we can only do legislatively, right, are about creating the environment for that to happen. One of the reasons I think that won't happen is because a lot of the large tech companies spend a lot of money making that not happen. We have an amazing opportunity. The Data Protection Bill went in the bin 3 weeks ago. Very likely, Labour will announce a new bill, presuming they win, in the King's Speech in just over a month. And that actually, rather than that being dominated by Google, Amazon, Microsoft, blah, 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 actually, there's an opportunity, I think, for a UK business to ask for things that will work better. And I would really encourage moving to an anticipatory footing in that.
So there's regulators working with each other and there's regulators working with industry. And I think something that is vaguely positive that we've seen is in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, the CMA, ICO, FCA, CMA, Ofcom, that's it. They all have come together and there's an overarching body now called the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum. So, and the idea behind that is that they will try and take topics that they all now opine on, because AI is in all of those spaces, and give us consistent guidance and be clear about who industry has to go to deal with certain things. That is hugely useful because both in the UK, but also internationally, although obviously I'm just talking about the UK, this Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum. But one of our big challenges is we spend a lot of money and time interacting with all the different regulators, design, coming up with lots of different designs or design features, because one is saying it needs this one is saying it needs that. So I think some kind of harmonization and clarity around who we should be working with, what the rules are, and some consistency, because that will save us money as businesses to know how to operate in different territories. Now, what I have seen this forum do is that they are going to industry and they are consulting and they are asking us to put forward examples of questions and issues that we are grappling with so that they can sort of table what their agenda is going to be to look at. So I think there is this desire to help business, but at the same time, they were very honest with me in saying what I said earlier, which is they need the skill sets in their organizations to be able to do this properly, and they need industry to help them learn and understand. So I think reaching out to them, I have found reaching out to them, and maybe it's because it's a big brand, but they've definitely received us with open arms on this.
Amazing. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So,
thank you so much for that. So many interesting points. My question was more about, so for me, I think that it probably will come down to the companies. I think there's a bifurcation when it comes to regulation over the world. So it's probably going to be best if it just comes from a homegrown sort of place. But like, how do we, when it comes down to it, there's obviously the principles of transparency and explainability, and then also worrying about not just the stakeholders, but the adjacent stakeholders. That's the big change now when it comes to worrying about the wider world, right? Worrying about the people that don't interact with it as well. That's the next bit. But then, how do we understand where, responsible AI really important, but it's definitely a spectrum, isn't it? So some decisions we don't really need to worry about at some point. We don't need to have that intensity above. And for me, the question is, how do we measure that sort of measurement of where do we actually really need to care about this and where do we not? I know for L'Oreal, I thought the face thing, the red line. So where do we decide where the red lines are that we need to focus on the most, and where can we kind of let it do its thing, basically?
I think there's as I said, the world has changed in the past 20 years. The trust that takes years to win can be lost in 6 months over a major PR crisis. And so that actually is a good thing, because that means that the brands actually care for real about self-policing. They don't think like, how can I get away with X, Y, and Z? They think, how can I be truly, and I mean, I'm in a big group. I wouldn't say anything if I didn't actually believe that. I see it from the inside. There's a genuine will, because, the companies are made of people too, and these people actually want to do good. And so basically, we were talking about the regulator and the company. What I've noticed is that the internal teams actually want and are happy to receive the regulation, and we even go deeper. I mean, I think we have a product that allows us to track our progress on documenting and kind of checking that, we're being responsible with AI. There's like 18 topics, but the internal version has 36. We are actually wanting to go deeper and further than what the regulations are. And so, it's the big question is like, how can we stop this to actually release something rather than, where do we put the red line?
And I'd add on that, right? So I think there are other contexts where I worked and I talked to big groups of product designers, right? So if you're making something, you can choose where to work, right? This is like one of the most often opportunity heavy spaces. You don't have to work at Google, right? You don't have to. You don't have to work in a place that you don't agree with the values. And there are companies who strain the social contract, but we know they do that. OpenAI have come up a lot this evening, right? I think if you're cool with working in a context where that doesn't believe in copyright, yeah, work there, right? But like you don't have to, and I think that's like something about values become behaviors, and that if you're in a product team, you can articulate what those values look like as behaviors, and then work out when you're ranging out of those.
Can I add one last thing? I would go and look at the EU AI Act. It sets out, here's high risk, here's medium risk, here's low risk, and there's stuff that you don't have to worry about. So if you are in, it very clearly calls out examples of categories of processing or activities that you would go, right, this is high risk, I need to put a lot more controls in. Use that as your starting point. And that's why I say I think it's useful to at least give you some kind of a scale. And otherwise, I would also look at a few other things. That there are some other standards out there, and I'm happy to chat with you afterwards. Like there's the NIST standard, ISO standard. There's 2 ISO standards that have come out around AI, managing it properly. And that will also give you a bit more advice around high risk and the lower risk. There's a lot of guidance coming out from a whole bunch of places. But start with the EU one. That's what we've started with.
Well, we've got time for one more question. So okay, 2 more questions, but swiftly answered.
I'll do a quick one. I'd love to know how you think responsible AI can actually drive differentiation and standing out. I look back to Monday night with WDC. Privacy is a really important value for Apple, but it's not stopped them being a differentiator and how they go to market with Apple Intelligence. Like, how do you think about the ability to act responsibly can actually be a standout differentiator and innovator?
So, do you want to go? I don't want to. So I think it, to me, it really put a smile on my face when I was driving around India and I was seeing all of these big posters from Apple, and it was like privacy first, and I was like, yay! But at the same time, I know you've had a whole bunch of lawsuits against you. So, but it does show you that and by the way, I've heard people say the same thing to me about Amazon and Google, and it's all privacy first. Look, they do think about privacy, but they've also got it wrong in the past, and I think they are realizing. And look at Facebook. It's had a massive impact on how much people really want to use Facebook. Maybe it's my generation, but I think companies are wanting to use it as a differentiator now because they realize that people are worried about how fast technology is moving, what companies are doing with tech. They've seen enough in the newspapers. Their trust in technology is being somewhat eroded. So if you put products out there that really are safe, you're going to have people far rather wanting to use them, I think, than products that are proven to not be safe coming from companies that have a bad track record. The fact that Apple puts it out there now and says privacy first, great, because others are going to want to say the same thing. And so I think that the dial is moving there. I think it is a differentiator in getting people to, a little bit along the lines of what you said, you can choose where you want to shop now. It's a little bit harder when you have people who monopolize the market, because then if you want to be in that space, that's the only provider. And that's where regulators are getting very concerned now. They don't want those markets to be completely controlled anymore by one or two powerhouses. And the difficulty is that if they control the market, if they controlled the market just in the data space historically, with advertising and cookies and all these sorts of things, can you imagine what they'll do with AI? So there's a need to control that space. This gentleman over here.
Yeah, we've got time. Did either of you want to respond to that? Okay.
Thank you. It's Jules O'Connor from Careful AI. It's great to hear you talk how difficult it is for regulation and stuff, because we're in the process of automating it against DRCF and all the other standards, because that's the boring stuff. Or we like to call it automating the boring shit. My question, when I think about responsible AI, it's actually making a product that's fit for purpose. And one of the things that we do with data science teams day in, day out, they seldom meet a product designer. And what's going through my head is, and it's a question for you guys, but also the crowd, how often do you and you actually meet anybody in a data science team who's designing algorithms, because for me, that's the missing bit. They're not close enough to the market to understand the impact of what they're doing. So you want to do it by show of hands? Because we're developing a chatbot to act like a product designer, and I think, why not just speak to the product designer? But I don't know if there actually are. So do you meet algorithmic designers in your day-to-day work? Because I think you should. So you do. Yeah. What about the crowd? Because I think if they did that, it would be responsible, it would be safer, because you guys are closer to the market than they are.
So what we've tried to do, and this is definitely a sea change from the way things were done in the past, is that you have teams working on things, and you have your architects, your engineers, your data scientists, you have your lawyer that is front and center for that particular proposition. And we have kind of races of who is responsible for doing what. They have team sessions where they work together. And that is to make sure right from the outset, we have something called a sort of statement of intent. What are we trying to do here? And we get everybody's input at the beginning. And because some things might just be shut down right at the beginning because we can't do this long term. It's a waste of money, a waste of time. But we make sure that everybody put inputs at the outset on an idea before it starts to bake. And then they have sort of check-ins all the time to make sure that the right people are dropping in at the right time. Now, that's not something that has happened a lot in the past. I think that AI has forced it to happen. We also put a lot of stuff, we centralized a whole bunch of stuff so that we try to bring people closer together, certain teams closer together. So even the data governance function, we have people inputting from there so they can work out what they will need to create to make that happen. So I think I'm not saying we're perfect. I think there's still lots we need to learn. I think you sometimes have people double hatting because you don't have enough people to be in all of these things. But we're definitely trying to bring that more together.
I have a fuzzy, soft feeling when we talk about when you ask that question, that should it be the algorithm designer's responsibility to do no harm? I mean, a knife can be used for cooking or as a weapon. I think it's very much in the hands of the way you use and what do you do with the AI that the harm can come. And so in that sense, I mean, obviously, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Product teams and design teams should be looking at the intended usage of the product. I mean, a database can store anything. Is it bad in itself? It's orthogonal from the usage. And I think AI in itself isn't good or bad. It's just, and I think there's a responsibility here that shouldn't fall on the heads of the people designing the algorithms.
And so I think that brings us to time, unfortunately, but we should continue the conversation. I want to thank all the panelists here and the audience for their time. Find those with the red name tag, and we can have some more conversations about responsible AI. Thank you, everyone.